Okay. Hey,
Yeah, who are you?
welcome to a special bonus episode of Grounded with John Tester and Maritza Giorgio.
Ideologically, Trump and Putin are closer than I am to Trump, even though we're both Americans. So that's the first thing people need to know about Putin.
That's a portion of our conversation with Michael McFaul, former U.S. ambassador to Russia, who also happens to be a native Montanan. And I always learn so much from talking with him. I'm Maritza Giorgio, alongside in person former U.S. Senator John Tester.
One of the things that you really get an opportunity as a U.S. Senator, of course, to meet a lot of really neat people. And, people that are constituents, people that are back in D.C. From all parts of the world. Michael McFaul is at the top of that list. He is an amazing individual, incredibly smart, knows a lot about international issues as they come up, and has spent a fair amount of his life studying Russia, studying Vladimir Putin. And so it'll be an interesting uh, conversation with
He
Michael.
knows so much about that region and its history, and I always learn something. He sheds so much light on what's actually happening, and really, I think will help keep us grounded. So you might be wondering, what is the deal? Where are we? What are we doing? Well, we're really trying hard to stay extra grounded this week because it just so happens we're both in Hawaii at the same time.
Unbelievable, slumming it and flying.
So
It's a tough life, but
that's
somebody's
what
got to do it,
the
and
wind is blowing through. So I'm on the Big Island with my best friend, and I flew over to say hi to the testers, and we decided we should just have a bonus episode of Grounded podcast. So aloha. This is your state.
not my state. Montana's my state. Oh, yeah, you're right. It's a permanent shaka.
John
So
has a
good.
permanent shaka, so we
Yeah.
have to yeah, they love you here, right?
Well, I think so, but they really don't know who I am, which is pretty cool too.
Okay, so this week we talked, it was hard to believe it was just earlier this week. We talked to Steve Schmidt,
Yep.
longtime political advisor, but man, things have taken a weird turn since then, and we've had so many headlines. We're gonna have to cross a lot of these out. So should we go through some?
Yeah.
Okay, let's start with
And by
the
the way, we should go back and look at past podcasts because I think you said that at every podcast we brought up that, we just can't keep up with everything that's going on. Because the truth is, it's an insane time. And it's why we're seeing the stock market drop. We're seeing all sorts of things of uncertainty happening because there's so many decisions being made without a lot of thought in Washington, D.C., that it's creating a lot of issues that working families are having a hard time getting through on.
and literally every week I think, oh, this might be slower. We might not have as much to talk about. And then bam, 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 we get all of these headlines coming through. Let's start though. It just came down that we are going to avert a government shutdown for now.
Yeah, I mean, they got cloture on it, and I think as this is being taped at this moment in time, they're getting ready to vote on some amendments, and then they'll vote on the continuing resolution to extend the existing budget out until September. Now, since I was on the Appropriations Committee, since I was chair of the Defense Committee, we did a lot of work on this very budget, by the way, that they're not going to take up. And I can tell you, and I've told you many times, and this is a fact, this is a very dangerous time in the world. Trump has made it more dangerous, I might add. And we're going to use a budget that's basically 2 years old to fund everything, including our military. It's a huge mistake. And government shutdowns aren't good. They're not good for government. They waste taxpayer dollars, but so did continuing resolutions. And I know that the theory is amongst the leadership on the Democratic side is it would be far worse if we had a government shutdown. And I get that. I was there. I understand that. And when you're there, it's a whole different world trying to sort through all the stuff that's going on. But the truth is, we're seeing this administration, Donald Trump in particular, with the help of Elon Musk, and maybe it's the other way around, Elon Musk with the help of Donald Trump, do their level best to take a chainsaw or a hand grenade, a meat cleaver, whatever you want to say, to the government, and they are destroying it. Yesterday I was on Aaron Burnett, and I was on with a guy by the name of Mark Stanford, former governor from South Carolina, and I said they've blown a chance to reduce government because I think there's an opportunity to make it more efficient. And Mark disagreed, and I don't think he disagreed. What I said was, is they're firing people that shouldn't be fired. And you've got to pre-think this stuff before you do it. Air traffic controllers. Look, I'm a farmer. The people in the FSA office, I can tell you, we need more of those folks to be able to service the folks that are raising food for this country. Take a look at our veterans. They're going to cut the Veterans Affairs Committee by 80,000 people. I watched Secretary Collins talk yesterday. What he talked about was privatizing the VA, and I don't have a problem with privatizing the VA if that's what the vets want, but that's not what the vets want. They want their VA. And we passed the PACT Act. Look,
There are cuts to,
it won't be implemented if you don't have the people to implement it. And toxic exposure is a big deal with our veterans. So the list goes on. But what was the first question?
well, there are cuts to the PACT Act in this.
In the continuing resolution. Yeah, exactly. And so, I mean, look, it's a situation where anybody will tell you the debt needs to be get under control. But when President Trump in his first term took office, the debt was higher when he left than when he started. And I think it's going to be the same way in this term. Why? If we have a democracy, why? Because they're not using their heads and they're not cutting the things that need to be cut. They're cutting everything. And that usually ends up costing them more money. And if it's privatized, I guarantee it'll cost more money.
So we are so grateful to have former U.S. Ambassador to Russia, Michael McFaul, also a fellow Montanan, join us here on the Grounded podcast. Thank you so much, Ambassador.
Great to be with you guys.
It's Ambassador, really, really, really good to have you on. And one of the reasons is because Russia's playing an incredible role in rural event or in international events right now. You lived in Russia as the ambassador to Russia. Could you give us a little insight on Putin, his personality, what drives him?
Well, I'll try. Yeah, I did live in Russia and I dealt with Putin. And I lived in Russia for many years, just so people know. I first met Putin before I was in the government, and I first met Putin in 1991. So we go way back. I would not call us Facebook friends. But there are some things people need to know about him. And I see, honestly, our negotiating team are making some mistakes in dealing with Putin. First, he is motivated by money and he's a thug. Those things are true. And he is a dictator. Those are true. He's killed, or his regime, I should be careful, has killed two of my personal friends, Alexei Navalny and Boris Nemtsov, and he's killing countless of innocent people in Ukraine. But he's also an ideologue. And I think this part is not well understood by Americans. And even when I was in the government, I was in the government with the Obama administration for 5 years, and we used to meet with Secretary of State Clinton and Gates and talk about Putin a lot. And a lot of people used to always say, he's transactional. All he cares about is money. And if, we just have to do a deal with him and everything will be great. And that's part of this story, but it's not the whole story. The whole story is that he believes that he is some champion of what he would call, not me, but what he would call conservative traditional values. And he thinks these are Russian values, and the decadent liberal West has been attacking these values for many, many years now. And he stood up for that, and he defended Russia against the decadent democratic liberal West. And then about a decade ago, he started exporting these ideas and building relationships with people of the same orientation, national populists, right? And in Hungary and Italy and France and here in our country. And Senator, you know these people better than I do. You've dealt with them up close and personal. I've just watched them. But there is this ideological thing that's going on that President Trump and President Putin share. In fact, I would say, I've just finished a book on this, ideologically, Trump and Putin are closer than I am to Trump, even though we're both Americans. So that's the first thing people need to know about Putin. The second thing you need to know about Putin, and it comes from my experience growing up in Butte, Montana. I was born in Glasgow. I finished high school in Bozeman. But I spent the formative years of my life, 3rd grade to 10th grade, in Butte, Montana. And I don't know what Butte's like now, and I don't mean to offend Butte. I love Butte. Butte is a great city. But when I was growing up, there was a pretty rough town. And from 3rd grade to 6th grade, there was this guy, Eddie, and he had a slang for his group and his gang that I know you guys, but I don't know you well enough to say it on air. I don't want to face all hate mail. But these guys were rough characters, and they were bullies. They were bullies, and they knew that if they pushed you and you backed down, then they could ask for more. And Putin reminds me a lot of Eddie. He's a bully. And in negotiating with him, if you just capitulate, you just give him everything, he's going to ask for more. And that tragically is what I see going on in these negotiations right now. You know, the Trump team thought, well, let's give him everything he wants. Let's say Ukraine has to give up territory. Let's say Ukraine can't be in NATO. Let's say you're going to bring him into the G7 and we're going to do business deals with you. All carrots. And then to the Ukrainians, all sticks, right? Cutting military assistance, cutting intelligence, saying you got to share half of your profits of your mineral deal with us. And I just don't think that works with Putin. And they're now running up against it. They gave him all that, and now he's asking for more. And I think they're going to have to develop a different negotiating strategy if they're going to be successful.
So we haven't talked about a lot about the mineral deal with Ukraine, but we were always pretty critical of people who colonized other countries.
Yes.
Ever seen the United States do anything like this before?
No. And as an American, I find it embarrassing. You know, of course, we have our colonial era from the 19th century, and Trump seems very enamored by all that. And I just want to be clear. It's both morally wrong, but it's also not in our national interest. So morally, we are asking a country that's fighting for its life to mortgage its future to pay us back. And by the way, Senator, you voted on this stuff. You know, when you voted on it, there was no clause in the law that you voted for that said, and in X amount of years, Ukrainians have to pay us back. So just on a kind of contractual basis, the Ukrainians are like, hey, you guys did this, and now you're adding a new clause to it, right? Second, you know, we've had allies that have fought with us. You know, we've had allies went to Afghanistan with us. Allies died next to our soldiers. They never asked us to repay them for that. And I just think it makes us look just morally wrong. And then that gets to the national security thing. I mean, our greatest strength for decades is that we have been a trusted, loyal partner to our democratic allies. And you know, I have one of my mentors here at Stanford was a guy named George Shultz. He was the Secretary of State for Ronald Reagan. And you know, he was a Republican. I'm a Democrat. I only voted for a Republican once, and he was a good friend of mine. And I knew he was going to lose really badly, so I could always say to Pat, "I voted for you, but I'm glad you're not in the Senate here in California." But George, you know, the other thing I would say, you know, in the old days, we didn't have debates about American national interests between Republicans and Democrats. We kind of agreed on a lot, but Schultz used to always say, in fact, his last piece he wrote, now that I think about it, he was 100 years old, and he wrote this piece in the Washington Post, and people go Google it if you want to check it out, where he said, trust is the coin of the realm. And he said, with trust in the room, good things happen. And if there's no trust in the room, good things don't happen. And that's what I think we're losing when we just treat everything as a transaction. We lose that trust between our friends and allies, and in the long run, that's going to come back to haunt us.
This is such a fluid situation. I don't have to tell you that. But just this morning, President Trump posted on Truth Social saying that he's had a very good and productive series of conversations with Putin, and then in all caps said, at this very moment, you know, Russian forces are surrounding Ukrainian troops, and then warned about a horrible massacre not seen since World War II. What do you make of that? Can you help us dissect that?
Yeah, I'd say two things about that tweet. I saw it too. So first, when he says, I've had a great conversation with Putin, I just want to underscore, if you've given the guy 15 things that he asked for and got nothing in return, of course you're going to have a great conversation with him, right? Like, and then he beats up on poor President Zelensky because they keep taking things away from him. And he says, "You don't have any cards, President Zelensky." Well, Mr. President, that's because you took the cards away, including money that the previous Congress and president had already approved. So that's on the first part. But the second part is also interesting because the reaction in Ukraine, and I looked at it, and including even from President Zelensky, is that that's not true. Our soldiers are not surrounded in Kursk, and what you see there is President Trump. I'm just guessing here, but it sounds like he's echoing what Putin just told him on the phone, and that's very dangerous when our president trusts Putin more than our intelligence community. And I don't know if you remember, but this happened very dramatically in Helsinki in 2018 when he sided with Putin and against our intelligence agencies. And here I see it again, and I just don't think you can make policies that are good for the American people if your main source of information is Vladimir Putin.
Would agree with that 100%.
Yeah, that one of the things, I think it was Peter Baker from the New York Times, he talked about what we're going through right now as a country. And we were talking about this before, just some of the things that we're seeing happen, whether you're, blocking the Associated Press from the Oval Office, or some of these other measures happening, arresting the Columbia student who organized the protests. And he said it was very similar to what he saw in the early days of Vladimir Putin. What do you think of that?
Yeah, I agree with that. I know Peter, and when he came with his wife Susan Glasser to be the bureau chiefs in Washington, I was going in and out of Russia at the time, and I've written about that period. And in fact, in February of 2017, for the Washington Post, I used to write a column for the Washington Post. I've been let go. They've got some changes going on there. I made that exact comparison,
Mm.
and I said, but Peter said it too. A couple things jump out, and then one thing that's different. So the thing that seems very similar to me is that the business community in Russia, when Putin came into power, and he was a kind of unknown, and he was kind of an accidental president, like Trump was in the first term, but they all supported him because they were just like, well, he's cutting our taxes. How much harm can he do? And Putin did, by the way. He cut corporate taxes by 15%. Think about this. He cut the income tax. He had a flat income tax. He cut it to 13%. That's about it. We can't do that in our country, thankfully. I think that's a bad idea. But that gives you a sense of what he was doing for these oligarchs was basically buying their favor with that. And then he started to roll back different pieces. And the piece he started with was the press, by the way. He understood the power of the independent press, and he went after them. And the business people said, well, it's no big deal. They're all, they're tired of an independent press because they were investigating them too. And then he arrested the richest man in Russia, Mikhail Khodorkovsky's his name. And they all said, well, he's just corrupt. They're never going to go after me. And then, fast forward, he installed a dictatorship, and they didn't resist in the beginning until it was too late. And I know a lot of these people to this day, and they all say we were wrong. We should have acted faster to constrain him. And that, to me, should be the message to the American people. Don't wait till he gets too much power. The difference, the good news, is Russia in 1999, 2000 had only experimented with democracy for a few years. We've got a long tradition of it. And I'm optimistic that our society, our independent media, our opposition party, our courts will do the right thing to try to constrain what I think are some very dangerous actions by President Trump and his administration on the domestic side. On the foreign policy side, the president has constitutionally more power. That is true. But even there, I would just remind people, if you disagree with them, we do have Congress. We do have independent media. Social mobilization has changed. And on this one, by the way, I've looked at the Trump is out of touch with the American people on this particular sets of issues.
The question is, and we bring this up all the time, is what's going to force Congress to act? Because I
Yes.
love all those dudes, both sides of the aisle, but the truth is they ain't done jack shit.
Well, I'm with you on that. You have a better explanation than I do, Senator, but I do wish I would like to see more activism. I was at a meeting with some members of Congress out here in California, and I'll tell you, the room was angry. Their constituents were saying to them, "You got to do more." One of them even said, I saw South Korean members of parliament jump over the wall, to stop the coup there. Are you jumping over any walls yet, Mr. I won't name the members of Congress. You know them. Um, but I don't know. You know how to answer that better than I do. I don't know what the answer to
Well,
that is.
the problem is the scary part is I can't. I mean, I can't answer it.
Yeah.
I mean, I've worked with many of those folks back there in a bipartisan way. They're good people. I don't know what's going to be the trigger that caused them to say, you know what, the country's more important than the next election. Because, let's be honest, Elon's sitting there with a big wallet, and we've got crappy campaign finance in this country. He can
Yes.
literally finance opponents against him, and I'm sure they're looking at it. But the
Yes.
truth is, and I speak of this as a former senator, it was a great honor to be a United States senator. You got to do some things, you got to help people, but the truth is, it ain't the end of the world if you ain't there. There's more important things than being a U.S. senator.
When you
Well,
think about,
Senator, just so you know, with my students who want to do public service, and wiser person than I told me this 30 years ago. I always say, don't think of your job. What job do you want to be? Think of the job you want to do. To think of what you want to do, and then figure out what job can help you do that. And the problem that I experienced when I worked in government on the executive side was there were way too many to be people, and then not enough to do people. And I think of Senator Rubio. You know him well. I don't know him that well, but I've interacted with him, and I just can't believe that he actually thinks that what he's doing right now lines up with what he used to believe. And I wonder, well, why are you in the job if you're just going to do things you don't believe in? So that's a good lesson for young
I
people to think
agree,
about.
I agree wholeheartedly with that assessment. Starting with USAID and going right down the line.
Yeah.
He's the same guy that used to stand on the Senate floor and talk.
Yes.
we didn't see a ton of pushback after that Oval Office meeting between Zelensky and Trump and Vance. We didn't see a lot of people coming out and disputing the fact that Russia, despite what President Trump said, that Russia was the aggressor here. And then we have this whole online spat between Elon Musk this week and Senator Mark Kelly. I don't see a lot of people coming to
No.
Senator Mark Kelly's defense. I mean, this is an astronaut, a veteran, United States veteran, and Elon Musk is calling him a traitor for posting photos and stories from his trip to Ukraine. I mean, Ambassador, how did this side switching happen so quickly, or at least silence from people not standing up for what's happening?
Well, I did see that, and I saw Senator Kelly on TV after a couple days afterwards. I mean, he's an American hero. Again, Senator Tester knows him personally. I don't know him personally that well. I've met him once or twice, but talk about a stand-up guy. And I thought the way he handled that was a good lesson for everybody else. The way he responded, he didn't back away, and it is not a good situation. Like Senator, you said campaign finance needs to be reformed. We can't have a guy like this just scaring everybody. And by the way, that also reminds me of Russia when these oligarchs privatized the state. That's what they did, and that's what's happening now. It does not lead to good outcomes for Russian citizens back then or the American people now. But I do think they may, I don't know. I hope people will see this for how embarrassing. I'm out there just I'm on every day and I'm getting attacked by these crazies every day because I'm on TV and social media defending them, and I've had people warn me, just so you know, they say, Mike, you got to be careful here. these guys can go after you. Be careful. So I get they use tactics that are coercive. They do, but this is a fight for the future of our democracy. Like if you can't fight for the future of this is not just an incremental policy debate, right? And that's why it's not about Democrats and Republicans. It's about Democrats versus autocrats, small d Democrats versus autocrats, and there's if you can't fight for democracy, then that means you're not going to fight for anything.
It's true. I got one more question for you, and then we'll let Maritza wrap this up. But you are very savvy as far as the United States standing in the world over the last many decades. Can you give us some insight on what Europe thinks about the United States right now, and even take it further, what the folks in the Pacific Rim think about us right now, Japan, South Korea? What are they saying? What are they feeling? What's your perspective on that?
What I hear mostly is shock. I was at the Munich Security Conference when Vice President Vance gave his speech berating all of Europe for how they practice democracy. And for European ears, I can tell you, we don't look like we're doing so great in the practice of democracy right now. And then he comes as a guest to their conference and tells them that, in Italy, Britain, and Romania, you're not doing. Sweden was on his list. And don't get me wrong, another time we can talk about problems of practice of democracy in those places. Those are legitimate concerns, but it was such a tone-deaf speech. And there was this sense of, America used to be the leader of the free world, and now it seems like you guys don't want to do that. And then, by the way, the night after that, I had dinner with two. Yulia Navalny, I just mentioned her husband was murdered the year before during that Munich Security Conference. And I was also with Jon and Maritsa, whose father was murdered by the Putin regime. And what they said to me, Senator, was, why did he give a big speech about how you're being anti-democratic and never mentioned our country? That was really striking to me. And it's the same in Asia. I'm actually on my way to Taiwan in a few days, and I interact with our allies from there, and there's a nervousness that we're just abdicating, that we don't care about values anymore, and we don't even care about engaging. And I think it's dangerous because I just finished writing my next book. In fact, when my book comes out, you guys have me back on in October, okay? It's about lessons from the Cold War for how to deal with China and Russia today. And the big three that we had four great things. We made mistakes in the Cold War, and I write about those mistakes too, by the way. But we had four great things we did. One, we had allies. The Soviets didn't really have great allies. And now we're throwing that away. Two, our ideas were better than the Soviets. And our ideas are better than the autocrats today. My book is called Autocrats versus Democrats. That's the title. China, Russia, America, and the we just changed it today. The new world disorder, given the moment we're in. We have better ideas. We're throwing those away. Like in competing with China, being, our ideas about democracy are popular around the world. We're throwing that away. Three, again, we made mistakes, but trade, investment, kind of rules-based order, that was why we won the Cold War. Our countries got richer, right? West Germany got richer than East Germany. South Korea got richer than North Korea. And that was because we had a global trading system. And now we're throwing that away, getting in fights with our allies. And then the one piece that, we also were a powerful country and a powerful economy, but I'm nervous that they're screwing that one up too. So I hope, the rest of America will realize that if we retreat, in fact, I just encourage everybody to go read about what happened in America in the 1930s. I think that's the era this reminds me of the most. We were in World War I. It wasn't very popular. We then had a horrible depression, and people are like, just not my problem, okay? Chinese got invaded by the Japanese, not our problem. The Italians invaded Ethiopia, and people said, where was that? Hitler and Stalin went into Poland, and millions of Americans, including a famous senator from Montana, by the way, now that I think about it. I'm forgetting his name, but there's a center named after him at Montana State. What is that guy's name?
That might be Wheeler.
Yes, yes, Senator Wheeler. Thank you, Senator. I was just reading this history recently. I did not know about Senator Wheeler until very recently because I'm rereading this history. He was pretty active in these arguments, but that didn't end very well for us, as we know. And so I hope, instead of repeating the mistakes of that period and maybe learning the positive things we did during the Cold War, so that we don't repeat the mistakes of the past.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. And I'm glad to hear you're still optimistic, Ambassador, because that's really what we try to do here is give people kind of an outlet and a way to stay grounded and optimistic and not catastrophize too much about what's going on, but
Yes.
be aware of what's going on and how we need to act.
Exactly. And just can I say one last thing on
Please.
that point? First of all, most people are purple; they're not red and blue. And you know, I got lots of friends in Montana that voted for the president, and they're still good people, and I still have beers with them. And I think our elites and our media are the more polarizing forces. That's just I'm not an expert on politics, but I have lots of relatives in Wisconsin and Michigan that voted for him too. And I still enjoy hanging out with those people. And I think we agree on a way more than we disagree on. And the second thing, Russia's a pretty pessimistic place. And Moscow, like kind of the intelligentsia, and read those giant books of War and Peace and the weather. And one time, one of my Russian intellectual friends said, "Mike, why are you so optimistic all the time? The world's a hellhole, and yet you're so optimistic." And I said, "Because I was born in Montana. I wasn't born in Moscow." And I think I can't prove it, but I think there's something to that. Being born in Glasgow makes you a little more optimistic than being born in Moscow.
Amen, brother. And as I said, remember Howard Cosell when he was on Monday Night Football, they were talking about Tillman who was playing for Atlanta, was born in
Mm.
Chinook. He said, if you're born in Chinook, you got to be tough. I'd say the same thing about Glasgow. If you're born in Glasgow, you got to be tough.
All right, thanks for having me.
Thank you so much. I think what I love the most about Mike McFaul is that he can break things down in a really simple way, which is what I've tried to do my whole career. Complex things in a way that's really easy to understand and conversational, and tell us why we should care, why this is important.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think you're absolutely 100% correct. And I think that his knowledge of how the world works for somebody like me who basically has spent my whole life living within 100 miles from where I was born until I got in the U.S. Senate. I think is pretty amazing because the truth is there's a lot of things that go on in this world, and there's a lot of people who want to be your friends, but when push comes to shove, they ain't your friends. And I think that when it comes to Putin and it comes to Trump, in the end, Russia's always been a country that, through my whole life, that has been a country you need to watch because they're a problem. And I don't think that's changed one damn bit today. And I think when he talked about the president reiterating what he's heard from Putin in different press conferences and different press releases, I think it becomes really, really dangerous. And I think it's incumbent upon folks who are in public service, in this case, the president of the United States, and in this case, everybody who serves in Congress, to make sure that they find out the facts before they start talking.
And I think one other thing that stands out to me, and then I know we have some final thoughts to get to with you, but you have a guy here from Big Sandy, Montana, who becomes a United States Senator, three-term United States Senator. You have a guy like Mike McFaul, born in Glasgow, Montana, becomes a U.S. ambassador to Russia. I mean, that to me, you want to talk about the American dream and what's possible in this country. That's incredible to me.
Yeah, big difference though. Mike McFaul is white hot smart. I'm telling you, that dude is one sharp cookie.
But can he drive a tractor?
No, and he doesn't do a good shaka either. So it's
Well,
all
yeah,
good.
yeah, he
It's
doesn't have
all
a
good.
shotgun. That's why he's not in Hawaii with us.
Yeah, that's it.
you have some final thoughts.
Well, yeah, I mean, I found out today that a person who's a legend in my mind, Alan Simpson, had passed away. And Alan's somebody that I got to meet about a dozen years ago. I sat with him at Conrad Burns' funeral, sat side by side with him. Great guy, somebody who every time he wanted to tell me something, picked up the phone and gave me a call and either left me a message or we visited for a while. But an incredible human being that made this country a better place. And this country is going to be diminished without him. Now, look, he lived a full life. He lived to be 93 years of old. And if Alan was sitting here right there, he'd say, quit your damn babbling. You know, things worked out just fine. But the truth is that I'm always sad when I see people who are what I would call salt of the earth kind of people. And nobody gets out of here alive, but pass on. Great man and somebody that I'll hold dear my entire life.
Yeah, I'm so sending love to everyone who loved him and his family. And of course, you know, when we see these people die who really were so invested in bipartisanship and diplomacy, and that's a dying breed.
Yeah, and Alan had the ability to do it with a level of comedy
Mhm.
that was pretty incredible. I mean, I still got a voicemail on my phone that he left for me over 2 years ago. I've thrown away all the other voicemails, but I kept that one because it is funnier than hell. I'm
Oh.
telling you, it is a riot. And it's just the way he talks. It's the way he puts it out. And normal people, if I said it, it wouldn't be near as funny. But when Alan Simpson says it, it was funny. And I think he used that comedy to break down barriers and get things done. And I think that's why he was effective as a United States Senator. And I think that's one of the reasons he'll be missed in the country.
Okay, hat. You have a hat that has
Yeah,
it's a little discolored for our listeners. It says Peps.
Well, it says Peps Bar in Big Sandy, Montana. Whenever I go somewhere else, I usually try to take something from Montana so people, if they see me, they'll know that I'm not from here. And
I think it's safe to say people will know you're not from here.
well, the fact that I don't wear shorts is probably a giveaway.
That's probably a giveaway. Okay. We want to say thank you so much to our guest, former U.S. Ambassador to Russia, Michael McFaul. Of course, our friends at Pearl Jam for letting us use their music. You can find more Grounded on Big Sky, Instagram, and YouTube. You can also shoot us an email anytime at groundedpcast@gmail.com.
What was that address again?
Groundedpcast@gmail.com.
Okay, just
Oh, yeah. Do you think we should add another email account?
No, that's good enough.
Okay. All right. We're going to say goodbye. We're going to say aloha to you from Hawaii. Thanks for tuning in. We'll talk soon.